She didn't knock. She didn't need to. Power like hers never asks permission. The cabin door exploded inward on screaming hinges, old brass groaning like it remembered every insult it had ever taken. A blade of cold evening air sliced through the warm room, dragging pine needles, lake mist, and the faint metallic promise of rain across the wide plank pine floor, had nailed down with his own hands, when I was still small enough to hide behind his legs. Karen filled the doorway like a storm wearing lipstick. Her blonde hair, always so carefully controlled for HOA meetings, had unraveled into damp strands that clung to her scarlet cheeks. Her eyes were wide-open furnaces, pupils shrunk to pinpricks of pure hate. In her fist she crushed a single sheet of paper, so hard the edges had rolled into wet curls and the ink had run in dark, guilty streaks down the fake letterhead. "This whole place belongs to the HOA now," she shouted. The words hit the low cedar ceiling and bounced back sharper. I didn't jump. I didn't stand. I didn't even lift my gaze from the chipped ceramic mug that had once belonged to my grandfather, the one with the faint coffee ring that never quite washed out, no matter how many times my mother scrubbed it. Steam still rose in lazy spirals from the black surface. I brought the mug to my lips and took one long, deliberate sip. The heat burned all the way down, grounding me, reminding every nerve in my body that this cabin, this table, this moment, they were still mine. Karen took 3 aggressive steps inside. Her brand new hiking boots, white soles never before touched by real dirt, left wet, muddy half-moons on the golden boards. Each print felt like a small invasion, a tiny flag planted in soil that had been in my family for 3 generations. Pack. Things. She separated each word like she was loading bullets. Your little vacation fantasy ends tonight. The board met in emergency session last night. Unanimous vote. This cabin is no longer fit for private use. It will be reclassified. Community asset, lakeside event space, yoga mornings, family barbecues, things actual contributing members of society enjoy. I let the silence stretch, let it grow heavy between us. Let it press against her like the weight of the lake outside. She read my stillness as surrender. "You really think you can just sit there?" she snarled, like some stubborn ghost refusing to leave. She slammed the crumpled notice onto the table so hard my spoon jumped and clattered against the saucer. OA Bylaws, Section 4.2, Subsection C, no overnight occupancy without prior written board approval. You've received 3 formal warnings. Don't waste your breath calling anyone. Your lawyer, your cousin in the city, your state rep. Nobody is coming. The rules are clear. The law is on my side. That was the moment he moved. The man seated directly across from me, the one Karen hadn't even registered until now, lifted his head with the slow precision of someone who has never needed to hurry. He pushed wire-rimmed glasses higher on the bridge of his nose with one long, steady finger. Then, in a voice so quiet it somehow made the entire cabin feel smaller, more fragile, he spoke. "On your side." 3 small words, dropped like stones into deep water, ripples spreading instantly across every surface. Karen spun so fast her ponytail whipped her own cheek, leaving a faint red line. For the first time since she'd stormed in, she actually saw him, really saw him. Her eyes narrowed, flickered with confusion, widened as some buried recognition tried to surface. "And who the hell," she demanded, planting both fists on her hips, "are you supposed to be?" Another squatter. Another freeloading friend of his. I allowed the smallest possible curve to touch the corner of my mouth. Not smug, just certain. I leaned back until the old oak chair creaked in quiet sympathy. "You might want to weigh your next few sentences very carefully, Karen," I said, voice low. "Because right now, whether you realize it or not, you are attempting to carry out an illegal eviction on private property in front of the sitting Attorney General of this state." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the soft lap of lake water kissing the dock pilings 50 yards away. I could hear the faint hiss of embers collapsing in the stone fireplace. I could hear the frantics inside Karen's skull as her entire worldview tried, and failed, to reboot. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a landed fish. For perhaps the first time in the 47 years she had spent terrorizing neighborhood committees and HO book groups, Karen Delaney had nothing, absolutely nothing to say. Quiet like that never lasts with people like her. She forced a laugh, high, brittle, cracking at the edges like cheap glass. The kind of laugh people make when the floor suddenly drops out from under them and they're still trying to standing. "Oh, She dragged the word out, syrupy and fake. Attorney General. Of course. That explains the suit. The whole quiet authority vibe. She waved a dismissive hand in his direction as though she could wave away a bad smell. I'm not here to start trouble. I was simply performing due diligence. A safety walkthrough. We take structural integrity very seriously. You understand. The Attorney General didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply leaned forward, elbows on the scarred oak table, fingers interlaced, and spoke again in that same low, oxygen-stealing register. So you entered private property without invitation, without notice, without legal process, and you presented this. He lifted the crumpled sheet between thumb and forefinger like it was biohazard material. Karen lunged for it instinctively. He withdrew it just far enough. That, she stammered, is an official notice. Board-approved letterhead. Signed by the secretary. Completely legitimate. He angled the page toward the dying daylight coming through the window. The paper was cheap copy stock. The edges had been hand-cut with scissors, crooked, uneven. The seal at the bottom was a blurry inkjet ghost of an emblem the state had retired in 2008. He made a small sound in his throat, not quite laughter, more like dry autumn leaves scraping pavement. This seal, he said, tapping it once with a fingernail, was discontinued 17 years ago after statewide standardization. Which means this document isn't irregular. It's forged. Which makes your actions, at minimum, criminal trespass with intent to intimidate using falsified official documents. Felony territory. Karen's throat worked visibly. A thin, shining line of sweat appeared along her upper lip and slid slowly toward her chin. You don't understand, she whispered. I didn't write this. I didn't design it. I was told to deliver it. The board they voted. They said I didn't get 'em out, they'd vote me off. 9 years I've served on that board. 9 years. You don't know what losing that means to me. The Attorney General tilted his head, only a fraction. So you're telling us the HOA board directed you to commit trespass, forgery, and targeted harassment against a property owner? Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. Her eyes darted, to me, to him, to the open door, to the lake beyond, searching for exits that had already closed. I stood up slowly. The chair legs scraped the boards like a slow-drawn blade. You taped one of these to my front door last Tuesday too, didn't you? I asked. The one claiming I owed $750 for a non-approved rural-style mailbox constructed of reclaimed barn wood. The one you said violated Aesthetic Uniformity Code Paragraph 7. Karen swallowed so hard the click was audible across the room. The Attorney General studied the page longer this time, almost tenderly, then laid it flat on the table like evidence already entered into the record. I think, he said quietly, it's time you told us exactly who gave the order. Karen took one stumbling step backward. Her heel caught in the mud she herself had tracked in. She grabbed the back of my grandfather's rocking chair to keep from falling. It wasn't just me, she breathed. It was him. Mr. Lawson, the president. He said this cabin was the last piece. That once it was gone we could finally control the whole shoreline. He said people like him. She jerked her chin toward me. Don't belong on this lake anymore. He said they never did. The cabin seemed to shrink around those words. The air grew thicker. I felt something cold and final settle deep in my chest. Not rage, exactly. The heavy clarity of recognition. This had never been about mailboxes, or overnight stays, or even the cabin. This was old poison wearing new clothes. This was 3 generations of my family's sweat and laughter being quietly erased from the deed books, one forged at a time. The Attorney General looked at me, just once, brief and steady, then returned his gaze to Karen. People like him, he repeated, each syllable measured. I'd like you to say, out loud, what that means to you. Karen froze. Realization hit her like cold water. She had already said too much. Far too much. Before she could answer, the door creaked again. This time the footsteps were heavier. Deliberate. Polished leather soles crossing the porch boards, like they already owned every nail and knot in the wood. Karen, a smooth baritone called from outside. What's taking so long? She flinched like a child caught with matches. Her eyes darted toward the doorway, just as a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. He brushed invisible dust from his sleeves with casual arrogance. His presence expanded to fill the small space instantly. Expensive cologne, expensive watch, expensive certainty that the world bent in his direction. The Attorney General didn't move. But I felt the subtle tightening in his shoulders. The man's gaze swept the room, me first, Karen second, the Attorney General last. For one heartbeat his polished mask cracked, then snapped back into place. He straightened his tie. He said, "This is unexpected." Karen rushed forward, words tumbling over each other. "Mr. Lawson, sir, I was handling it exactly like you instructed, but he's got the Attorney General here and—" Lawson cut her off without raising his voice. "You were supposed to keep this quiet, Karen, discreet. Instead, you've turned a simple enforcement into a public spectacle." The Attorney General spoke next, slow, deliberate, every word placed like a chess piece. "Mr. Lawson, I presume. President of the Lakeside Serenity Illinois." Lawson's smile returned, colder, sharper. "Titles are irrelevant out here. What matters is that this cabin occupant the board has designated for regulation. And you," he pointed at me without turning his head, "are obstructing progress." Heat rose under my skin, but I kept my voice level. Funny thing about progress. Last time I checked, this land has been in my family name for 3 generations. You don't get to regulate history. Lawson's jaw tightened, the first real fracture in the mask. History is sentimental, power is practical. The Attorney General forward slightly, eyes locked, predator calm. "Then you're about to discover what real power actually looks like." The room went still. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Lawson walked past Karen like she was furniture. His eyes stayed on the Attorney General. "You think your office impresses me?" he said. "You sit behind a desk in the Capitol. I sit at zoning commission meetings. I sit at judges' dinner tables. I sit on land deals that decide where entireds grow. Out here, my word outweighs yours." Karen's lips parted in shock. She hadn't expected him to challenge a state official so openly. Lawson snapped his fingers, once sharp. 2 large men appeared in the doorway. Not in uniforms, not in suits. Just heavy, thick-shouldered men in plain dark clothes. One leaned against the frame. The other cracked his knuckles slowly, deliberately. Karen whispered, You brought them here?" Lawson ignored her completely. "You wanted results, didn't you?" "This is how results happen." My stomach twisted, but I didn't step back. I looked at the Attorney General. He hadn't moved. His calm was almost unnerving. Lawson leaned closer to him, voice dropping to a velvet threat. "Here's how this ends. You both leave this cabin tonight. You forget everything you saw. You forget everything you heard. If not, accidents happen in places like this. Remote places, quiet places, forgotten places." The fireplace popped. A log settled. That was the only sound for several long seconds. Then the Attorney General spoke, soft, almost gentle. "Funny thing about accidents," he said. "They don't usually in high definition on live surveillance feeds." Lawson's smirk faltered. His eyes flicked upward. A tiny red light blinked steadily in the corner of the room. One of 3 small security cameras I'd installed after the first fake notice appeared. He hadn't noticed them. "You've been recording," he said. Voice harder now. I folded my arms. "Not just recording. Streaming. County server. Real-time backup." Karen gasped, hand flying to her mouth. The 2 men in the doorway shifted uneasily. They hadn't signed up to be caught threatening a state official on camera. The Attorney General leaned back in his chair. "Every word, a word, Mr. Lawson. Every threat, every admission of conspiracy. Already preserved, already duplicated." He tapped his phone once on the table. "My office received the feed minutes ago." Lawson's eyes betrayed the first flicker of real panic. "You think a video matters? I've purchased half this county." The Attorney General smiled, thin, cold. "Then you must have forgotten about the other half." Lawson's men hesitated. One muttered, "Boss, maybe we should." Lawson snapped. But the fracture lines were spreading fast. I stepped forward, voice low. "You thought this was just about me, about one cabin. But you just walked in here on camera, threatening the Attorney General of the state. That's not an HOA matter anymore. That's federal." Karen slumped against the wall. "No, I didn't sign up for this," she whispered over and over. The Attorney General rose to his feet, slow, unhurried. "No, Lawson, you shut up. Because the moment you crossed that threshold, this cabin stopped being your territory. It became a crime scene. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Even the lake outside seemed quieter. Lawson's composure finally shattered. Sweat beaded along his hairline. He tried to stand taller, puffing his chest, but his voice cracked on the edges. "You don't scare me. I'll bury this in court. I have judges who owe me. I have money that talks louder than any badge." The Attorney General reached into his jacket pocket. For one frozen second Lawson's minced, hands twitching toward waists, but all he pulled out was a slim leather badge wallet. He flipped it open slowly. Gold caught the firelight. "This isn't county," he said. "This is state. One phone call from me and every federal agency with jurisdiction gets involved. You really think your reach is that high?" Lost men exchanged glances. One actually took a step backward onto the porch. "Boss," he muttered. "He's not bluffing." Lawson's voice broke. "Nobody leaves. He has no real proof." I pulled my phone from my pocket. The live feed counter glowed on the screen. "Funny you mention proof. Right now, over 1,200 people are watching this stream, including the sheriff's dispatch." Karen slid down the wall until she sat on the floor, knees drawn up, whispering, "No, no." The Attorney General's voice turned to Winter Steel. "Lawson, here is what happens next. You walk outside with me, calmly. Your men stay exactly where they are. If you resist in any way, the deputies already en route have been watching this feed for the last 10 minutes. The two men raised their hands. They wanted no part of what was coming. Lawson spat the words like acid. "You'll regret this. You have no idea who I am." The Attorney General leaned in close, voice a low growl. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. And tonight, so does the rest of the state." In the distance, faint at first, then growing, sirens began to rise across the water. Blue and red lights started flickering through the cabin windows like distant lightning. Lawson's face drained to gray. His empire, built quiet threats, greased palms, and fear, was collapsing in real time. Karen rocked slightly where she sat, hands covering her face. I just wanted to keep my board seat. I didn't know it, but I didn't know." Deputies moved onto the porch, boots heavy, voices calm and professional. Weapons ready, but not raised. The Attorney General lifted one hand, command without volume. "He's inside. Fraud. Extortion. Criminal conspiracy. Take him." Lawson tried one final, desperate lunge, pointing at me. "This is his fault. He's the trespasser." A deputy, tall, steady, answered without emotion. "This man is standing inside his own registered property. 3 generations of chain of title documentation already on file with the county. You, however," he snapped cuffs around Lawson's wrists with a clean metallic click, "are finished." Lawson struggled, veins bulging in his neck. "I own this county. I own everyone in it." His shouts faded as deputies dragged him across the porch. His polished shoes scraped helplessly against the wood he'd once believed he controlled. His 2 men didn't fight, hands already raised, muttering they had no part in any of this. Karen looked up at me through tears, face streaked, voice small. "They'll come for me too, won't they?" I met her eyes for the first time without anger, only clarity. "You chose your side the moment you walked that door with a forged notice in your hand. Maybe now, you'll finally understand. This land isn't yours to take." The Attorney General placed a firm hand on my shoulder, voice steady. "Justice slowly sometimes, but when it finally arrives, it never misses." I stepped out onto the porch. The cool lake breeze washed over my face, carrying pine, freedom. A calm I hadn't felt in months set into my bones. This fight had never been only about me, or one small cabin on a quiet shore. It was about the right to stand your ground, to protect what your family built with their hands and their years, to remind men like Lawson and women like Karen that no amount of money, no network of favors, no whispered threats can place anyone above the law. I hadn't fought for this country, hadn't carried its weight on my shoulders in uniform, just to be told by some self-appointed kingpin that I couldn't live peacefully on the land my grandfather cleared, my father loved, and I swore to keep. The Attorney General joined me on the porch. We watched the blue and red lights pulse across the dark water. "Tonight," he said quietly, "the whole state heard you. The sirens slowly faded in the night, but the message they carried stayed behind, hanging in the cool air like smoke that refuses to dissipate. Freedom isn't given, it's defended. Family isn't inherited, it's protected. And justice, real justice, always outlasts corruption. Always."